The interesting part is that there are some states which have been consistently improving both their ratings and as a consequence their ranking. And there are some states who it seems for a few years seem to be doing well and then they fall. So the interesting part that we come up is that it's not necessary that if a state improves once, that improvement continues into the future. The second part that I think is very interesting here is that on the whole, the economic ratings for the states, it's not clear that all the states are improving on the whole, right?
That's right.
So it seems that there are some states that are consistently becoming worse and worse, and we have Jharkhand as one example there, and some states, and Gujarat is of course one of them, who are consistently becoming better.
Right.
The third part is it's not necessary that states who have low incomes always have poor economic freedom. In fact, you have some examples like Chhattisgarh, who for a while did very well despite the fact that they had very low incomes.
I want to talk about the whole decentralization of economic power. There is a lot of centralization that exists between center vis-a-vis state. The whole planned versus unplanned expenditure is very arbitrary, is what the report points towards. What are the solutions there?
Oh, you are only talking about decentralizing, I find, from the center to the states. There is equally the question of decentralizing from the states downwards. Remember that our states are as big as most countries.
Right.
So if all power is concentrated in the state capital, I would not call it a classic example of decentralization at all. And for different subjects, there are different appropriate levels at which different things should be controlled. There are some things which are appropriate at the national level, I mean monetary policy for instance,
right.
Something appropriate at the state level, and other things are appropriate at the district level or at the city level.
On the decentralization bit, your report distinctly talks about the Planning Commission and how it is very arbitrary on the kind of funds that are allocated to states. It's almost discretionary actually. How does one resolve that? Does one really need a Planning Commission to begin with?
Well, the simple answer is no. When one is talking about the centralization issue, and I'm saying this in the context of the union vis-a-vis the states, it's not just about financial and fiscal devolution. It's more than that. But at the moment on the fiscal and the financial, the simple point is that the constitutional organ for this devolution is the Finance Commission, and the Finance Commission's mandate has been progressively diluted, particularly since the 1970s, and consequently we have the plan non-plan distinction. We also have issues over what is grants and aid, which is essentially discretionary vis-a-vis formula-based transfers. We also have various issues connected with the special category states and the lack of transparent criteria in defining what is a special category state. And the final element we have in this puzzle is the large element of transfers that go through the Planning Commission through the centrally sponsored schemes. And indeed, therefore, the short answer is we did perfectly well before the 60s when these centrally sponsored schemes did not exist. And therefore, we should simply wind them up, scrap the Planning Commission, restore the mandate of the Finance Commission.
Should foreign investors, and this report seems to suggest all the more, should foreign investors look at India as states that are playing a part in this economic growth? Let me first begin with you, and not look at this country as a whole. We've crippled to 4%, we've crippled to 4.5%, but there may be spectacular stuff happening in a Gujarat, in a Madhya Pradesh, in a Chhattisgarh.
The big story in India actually is that many investors, particularly foreign investors, get this heterogeneity of India wrong. And the big story there, certainly so far as manufacturing is concerned, is the moving away of manufacturing to the western parts of India and to the southern parts of India with the exclusion of Kerala. So yes, that is the big story, and the fact of the matter is that once the clearances, FIPB or otherwise, end in Delhi, the rest of the clearances are all state level subjects, whether it is forest, environment, land, electricity, water, all of it. So indeed, the state differences do matter.
Sorry, you want to comment on that? Yes.
Shivraj Singh Chauhan was in the United States a year ago, and earlier on, even Indian industrials wouldn't go to Madhya Pradesh, but there he was making the speech for FDI, and when people said, what is special about your state, he smirked and said, India's GDP growth 4.5%, Madhya Pradesh's GDP growth 11.98%. I mean, that smirk and the data in some sense said it all. He says, you know, far from being this backward part which is dragging down India, we are lifting up the rest of India. So take a look at us.
Right.
Not only that, a feature of many of these backward states is ample land, ample labor, relatively low wages. So provided the power and other infrastructure come in, These are places with excellent comparative advantage.
This seems to suggest that good economics could be good politics as well. If a similar survey was done on political, social parameters and not on fiscal, economic parameters alone, will the takeaways of this survey be very different from the one that I spoke about?
Oh, completely different. I do not think you will find Chhattisgarh as one of the freest states in terms of political and social. I mean, you see the kind of conflict going on there. It's a very different order. Gujarat, for instance, the social indicators have never been quite as good as. So, and how you would relate that to social freedom, I'm not sure what indicators you would use. There is some correlation between economic freedom and social and political freedoms. There is an attitude which will tend to go together. I don't think you will find that these are completely independent. On the other hand, you will not find a close correlation.
You've had people like in Wwatch say in comments say that, you know, the Gujarat story is not the complete story because it doesn't talk about social indicators. You want to add, contradict, refute what the other two have
I think there are two parts to this. First, social indicators take much longer to change.
That's right.
So the impact of any kind of government policy on those, it takes more than a few decades. Economic freedom, on the other hand, has relatively more rapid changes, responses, and of course the impact on growth is also part of it. So that's one part of it. There's another part of it. I do not think that you can have sustained economic freedom without having social freedoms. What we understand to be social freedom.